Are live on social media. Let me start our music and we'll let everybody in.
All right. I'm ready.
There we go.
Oh, we're recording. Hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Todd DiPastino, and welcome to our Veterans Breakfast Club Scuttlebutt for this Monday, May 6th. I'm the executive director of the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit located here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We do these programs twice a week, every week, and we've been doing these programs online for 4 years, if you can believe it. And the idea is to bring veterans together with members of the public and have people whose lives intersect with the military experience or war, to share stories of service and of their experiences, maybe even with military families. So we are all about veteran stories. We're all about sharing those stories. We do it in person and online. We call it creating communities of listening around veterans and their stories. And our idea is that these programs connect, heal, educate, and inspire. And we do a lot of programming, and they're made possible from your support. And we're very, very grateful for your support and our sponsor support. You could go to veteransbreakfastclub.org and learn more. You could donate. You could become a member. And we'll be talking more about our sponsors and other ways to get involved with the Veterans Breakfast Club a little bit later in the program. But right now, I want to introduce Sean Hall. Hello, Sean. How are you?
Good evening, everyone. I'm great.
And we have our new intern from Madison, Wisconsin, 16-year-old Henry Shepke. Hello, Henry. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. Thank you. And thank you for handling some of the back work. What do you call this, Sean? It's not back office work. It's
Sort of the behind the curtain.
behind the curtain, technical work.
Yeah, the technical side.
Yeah, technical side, dealing with chat. So tonight is open conversation. And as you know, we're really, really trying to keep to one open conversation a month. So tonight's open conversation, 4 weeks from tonight will be open conversation. That's June 3rd. And what we do is we ask our veterans and others to submit topics for conversation. And we're very lucky that many of you did submit some topics. We've queued them up. So this is going to be a fast-paced program. We're going to be moving from one to another. We have Nancy Smoyer with us, a former Donut Dolly who submitted some great ideas for discussion. We have Marilyn Pignataro with us. Hello, Marilyn. You are from with PALS Skyhope, a nonprofit I want you to talk about. Nadia Rupniak, good to see you. Don Nemchek. Ron Farina has joined us. Bob Connor, who searches for POW MIAs in Vietnam. He's going to be joining us with a really neat and important update. But before we get to all that, I want to let people know that we have another program coming up on Thursday night, like we usually do, with Glenn Flickinger. I don't know if Glenn is in the Zoom room here, but if he is, he could tell us a little bit about this program. Glenn? Do you see Glenn? Sean?
Take a look. Let me take a look here. I did see him come through the room. I do not see him at this point.
That bum. He told me to be here.
Oh, there he is. I see him now. Oh. Yeah.
He didn't hear me say that, did he?
He was hiding.
I heard that.
Oh, jeez.
I've been waving my arms for 5 minutes.
Well, we have, Glenn, I have the highest regard for you and the program that you do and all that you do for the Veterans Breakfast Club.
I've heard all this before.
And you have been hosting this Thursday night program. We originally thought it would go for maybe 8 weeks, maybe 9 weeks, as long as Masters of the Air, the Apple Plus TV series went. And but man, it's continued. Here it is, early May, and we're still at it.
The stories just keep coming, and we're just been absolutely blessed with people we've met in the last 2 or 3 months. Last week was Marilyn Walton and 2 more of her friends with great POW stories, dramatic stories about the experiences they went through as POWs, and all the others earlier. But the other group we've gotten to know so well is this very tight group from the 100th Bomb Group Foundation, led by Nancy Putman. Of course, that's where Lucky Luckadoo, that was Lucky Luckadoo's bomb squad or bomb group. We had, who was it? Jim Blakely on a couple weeks ago about his father. So this week it's extra special, I think. We'll have Nancy Putman, whose father was a 100th Bomb Group bombardier and good friends with Rosie Rosenthal. They went through training together, and have a lot of stories about the 2 of them. Her father was shot down and with POW in Stalag 1, not Stalag 3, and had a very different experience than those in Stalag 3. At least that's what she's told me. The other 2 guests are, one is the daughter of Harry Crosby, the navigator that was seen in battle or in Master of the Air, and the author of the book On a Wing and a Prayer. And then the other guest is the grandson of Rosie Rosenthal, who was one of the other main characters in the series. All 3 of them, especially Sam Rosenthal and Rebecca. What is Rebecca's last name? I'm going to say Rebecca Crosby, but that's not it. Hutchinson. Were intimately involved in the making of the series. So actually Sam Rosenthal appears as a bit character in a couple of episodes because he's a young actor. Mm-hmm. So we're going to hear about their father's stories and grandfather's stories in Sam's case briefly, and then we're going to hear about their interaction with the making of the miniseries. So I think
cool.
Really cool. Yeah.
So cool. And I got several emails after our program last Thursday that last Thursday's program was the best program we've ever had, in their opinion. And that's just such a tribute, Glenn, seriously, to the work that you do, kind of working with the guests, getting the stories, doing all the prep work. And then you're so organized when you come on and run the program. So thank you for that.
It's a labor of love. As I've said to a couple of people, it's not work if you just love it. It's just fun. So it's great.
Right. And then a week from tonight, in honor of Asian and Pacific American Heritage Month, we are doing a program on Japanese Americans in World War II with Dr. Mitchell Mackey, who's the CEO of the Go for Broke National Education Center Foundation. We'll be talking about the special role that Japanese Americans played, certainly in the war, in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, but also, of course, the experiences of the incarceration camps in the Mountain West during the war, and the special internment of Japanese Americans, those American citizens born here, were subject to. It's a fascinating story and conversation, and we'll talk about that next Monday. All right, so that's what we're up to. It is also today the first day of National Nurses Week. And thank you, Don Nemchek, for alerting me to that. National Nurses Week stretches from today, May 6th, to May 12th. And you probably can guess, I think, if you thought about it a little bit, why it's National Nurses Week. And it's because May 12th is Florence Nightingale's birthday. And Florence Nightingale was considered kind of the first modern nurse. And she was I don't know that much about her, but what I do know is that she was a really fascinating person, extremely smart, extremely good writer, and was really modernized the practice of medicine. I mean, not in so much a scientific way, but in an administrative way. She was a statistician. She loved to do what we would call today infographics, data visualization, created great charts and for people to understand how disease spread and how, what treatments worked and what didn't. She was a military nurse. She became famous during the Crimean War, which was a war. Oh my gosh, this is going to challenge my memory. The Crimean War. Britain?
1848, 1850.
I don't think so, Glenn.
No, 1858, 1860. I keep guessing.
I think it was like 1854. And I think it was it was one of those great power, those 19th century great power wars. And there were many of them. They were short, they were decisive, and they involved different combinations of the great European powers. And this one was a slightly unusual combination. It was like Britain, France, and the Ottoman Empire versus Russia. I think that's what it was. I think Russia had its sights on the Ottoman Empire and Turkey, present day Turkey. Then it was the Ottoman, Constantinople. Charge of the Light Brigade, says John Grogan. Yeah, so Florence Nightingale kind of administered to the wounded during the Crimean War. It made her famous. And, ever since then, I think we've had a special place in our heart for those who nurse on the front lines and battle zones. Historically, they've been mainly women, but in the past, certainly decade, in the military, in a big way. I mean, I think at more than 1/3 probably of military nurses are male. So the demographics have changed, but the job in many ways has remained the same. And I just thought I'd throw it open to begin with. Don's Nemchek's suggestion. Do we have any nurses who are on the program, first of all? Feel free to raise your hand. Wave your hand in front of the camera if you'd like. Do we have any veterans who might remember nurses, have a special memory of nurses, help them? Oh, I'm sorry, Don, I muted you.
We can hear you, Don.
Okay, great. We good to go?
Yep.
Okay, good. Well, Todd, thank you for bringing to the audience the National Nurses Week. I think it's very important. And from my era, of course, the Vietnam War brought nurses in country, actually. There were 8 nurses that were killed in Vietnam. And although I was not treated by a nurse, of course, in the field, I was wondering if anyone had any knowledge of anybody that was treated in the field or if they were treated themselves from wounds, etc. They were very brave, of course. They were in harm's way as well. They were treated differently. And just from my reading, and I was a fan of China Beach, I thought was a very good series about the Vietnam War. Had a little bit more drama in it maybe than most people would want them to see. But I think it gave a good depiction of what those women went through. It was tough for them. They were brave. They came to light to serve. And there's a lot of good books. I think we've had some guests that were nurses in Vietnam. I think one of them was instrumental in getting the statue of the Navy nurses in D.C. by the Vietnam Memorial. So I just thought it was noteworthy today to mention them, honor them, and I thank you for kicking off today's show with them.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely worthy of discussion. And we've certainly have done programs on, I think, Vietnam nurses. We should absolutely do so again. But I'm curious too, because my sense is, after working with veterans for so long, nurses really have a special perspective on war that the combatants don't necessarily have. Nurses see day after day, week after week, month after month, this grim parade of bodies coming, young people coming to them with every kind of wound, every kind of, illness. And they see more, I think, than even the combatant in the field might see, who's focused on they're focused on their little plot of ground where they are and staying alive. And certainly they see a lot of harm and a lot of damage. But I think nurses get a sense, like few others do, maybe, of the scale of the destruction that war causes. And I don't know what it must be like to witness, say, a tour in Vietnam as a nurse and, 10 to hundreds, if not thousands of wounded, and then come home and live the rest of your life. I don't know how you ever maybe get over that. Does it require some kind of healing? You know, I'm very curious about
I'm curious how the VA handled their PTSD issues because, again, they're
Right.
professionals, they're medical people, but they were holding hands of 18-year-old boys that were afraid they were going to die or were about to die, and they were afraid. And those nurses, my hat's off to them.
Yeah, my hat's off to them too. My off to them too. And I mean, the nurses that I think we do have a hand up. The nurses that I've talked to have said that it's been the most important experience of their lives. Renee.
But I finally have gotten around to reading the novel The Women by Kristen Hanna. I'm probably the last one in my group of Red Cross workers that's read that because I was literally afraid to. We spent a lot of time, some of us spent a lot of time going to the hospitals to visit patients and all. And what I saw the nurses do was absolutely unbelievable. But what this book points out is when they came home, nobody, including the VA, recognized that there were women in Vietnam, and they didn't even have any programs for them initially. They rejected them. So they had a much harder time coming home when the rap groups, so to speak, started and everything. But they, like one of them said in the book, and I actually heard this myself, is when they'd see somebody with severe facial injuries or head injuries, will my girlfriend, wife, fiance still love me when I get home? And they probably had to answer that question over and over. I heard it a couple of times. They probably heard it hundreds of times. And one of the things they would do when somebody came in that wasn't going to make it is whenever they could, they would hold their hand so the person wouldn't die alone. And how many times do they have to do that? And what was the toll on their psyche? It's just hard to imagine. But the nurses that served in Vietnam or any war, Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever, certainly deserve the highest level of respect because they went through so much, yet even when the men were finally being recognized and treated, they were still rejected and pushed out. They were just ghosted.
Right. In the book you refer to, The Women by Kristen Hanna, is a New York Times bestseller. It focuses on a military nurse, an army nurse who goes to Vietnam, I think in 1965. And
67.
67. You said that you were afraid to read it, and that's because former Red Cross volunteers, donut dollies like yourself, aren't depicted well in the book.
No, it wasn't that. It was some of the donut dollies that had read it said it just took them back completely.
Oh, it did really. Now I thought
Yeah,
that I thought the book kind of dismissed the donut dollies too.
it did. But
Okay.
but some of the things that happened, I'm finding out now. I've been reading it the last 2 days, and I've got 38 pages left to go. And this part really isn't like us at all. But some of the things that happened, some of the things they said, we experienced exactly the same things. But that book was written based on interviews with a lot of nurses, including Diane Carlson Evans, and I can literally see her stamp on some of it.
Yeah.
It did not all happen to one nurse. It was a combination of all of them, but they put it all into one character. And
Yes.
there is so much truth in that book.
Hmm.
It has been optioned by Warner Brothers for a movie, and I hope they treat it well and not change it a lot, because it would really tell the public a lot about what women, mainly nurses, but also other women, went through in Vietnam.
That's a wonderful review, Renee. Thank you. And I put a link to the book, the author's website, here in the chat. Another piece of media that brought kind of Vietnam nurses to the public eye was this series. It lasted 4 seasons, 1998 to 1991. Dawn Nemchik, you mentioned it in your email to me. I looked it up. I've never seen one episode. At that point in my life, I think I was in graduate school and I was not watching any TV. I remember hearing about it, but it took place at a evacuation hospital in Da Nang near the R&R Center at Red Beach or China Beach.
China Beach.
China Beach, not Red Beach. And I think when the series came out, I think Donut Dollies had a problem with it then also. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
why.
Because they depicted a 19-year-old as a donut dolly with the first name of Cherry, and that signified something negative in itself. I kind of am reticent to say anything about it. Nancy might explain a little bit more, but it was really unrealistic. And we were writing letters to Bill Broyles, to John, whatever his name it was, and they finally ended up, based on everything we contacted them with, they ended up with a Red Cross worker who'd been a donut dolly, but was still with Red Cross in the area as a consultant to the show, and it did improve.
Okay.
With representing us over time. We weren't the main characters in the show, but we had decent characterization when we were there.
Okay. So they did respond to the Donut Dolly.
Yes.
complaints. Okay. Interesting. And it was, they
Nancy
were,
can speak to that even more
Nancy?
than I can.
Nancy?
Well, we tried to barrage them, and I actually went to one of the times when they were filming. I went to the set and talked to the producer, one of the producers, who was not very polite. And it was a tough road, but as Renee said, it did get better. And I would like to point out, Todd, if you do watch any of the episodes, there's one episode where they interview real donut dollies and nurses. And it's really good. That's the true story.
Where they interview, so there's an episode of China Beach where they interview donut dollies and nurses?
Yes.
Yeah.
Huh. And they're not actors reading scripts. These
Nope.
are actual.
No.
Nope.
They're people
it's
we know.
strictly an interview.
Oh, I'll have to watch that.
Yeah.
That sounds great. And for those of you who don't know about the Donut Dollies, they were Red Cross volunteers. It was a program during the Vietnam War. There had been earlier programs for Korea and World War II. American Red Cross programs, a supplemental recreation overseas program where young women, I think you had to be a college graduate. You had to have a certain extroverted personality. You probably had to, be fairly attractive. You certainly had to be adventurous. About 1,000 of these young women were sent to Vietnam for 1-year tours where they traveled the country, trying to boost the morale of service members. And they went to some of the most remote fire support bases in country, and they were everywhere. And a lot of them have come on our programs, and we're so grateful when they do, because they provide a really unique vantage point on the war experience. Don.
Yeah, just to follow up one other thought. Several months ago, I was at a Giant Eagle, and one of the greeters was a woman in a wheelchair. So I was sitting on the bench waiting for my wife to get done shopping, and I started talking to her and found out that she was a nurse in Vietnam. And the reason she was in a wheelchair, a drug-addled soldier threw her down the steps and injured her back so severely that she was wheelchair bound. And I signed her up for the BBC magazine. And the reason she was so excited about that magazine, Todd, was it was the issue of Elvis Presley. And as I explained it to her how Elvis Presley served, and we have a magazine out and we sent it to her, I followed up a couple of weeks later and found out that she's no longer with them. And I was very disappointed because I wanted to speak further with her, and she was no longer up at the Giant Eagle. So that was just another story about how the nurses, it was later in the war, probably 72, the draftees, discipline was bad, drugs were prevalent. We've talked about that on a prior program here. And it's just amazing stories that you just never know when you encounter someone and you start talking to them, finding out what their background was. And particularly, we're learning more and more about the donut dollies, the Red Cross, the nurses who served in Vietnam. And these stories are just as harrowing as the machine gunner in Hue City, or a fierce battle like that.
Right. Thank you, Don. And Don, could you send me her name if you could recall it? Because I'd like to contact her.
You know what? I'm going to have to look it up. I know she lives in Dravosburg.
Okay, I'll look that up then.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, but I do know that she lived in Dravosburg, and that was kind of my AO back in the day.
And if she's on our mailing list, I'll be able to do a search and find her. Thank you very, very much, Don. I appreciate that. Hey, before we go any further, I do want to just say hello and welcome. He certainly does not have to say anything. Ralph Galati. Ralph Galati is got in contact with me. Thank you to Joe Griffiths, who is the ultimate connector. And I managed to get Ralph to agree to be our guest on September 16th, which is near National POW MIA Day. And the reason why I wanted to have him then was because he was a Vietnam POW at the Hanoi Hilton. And he speaks about his experience. He was an F4 weapon system officer. He's giving a thumbs up. Feel free to unmute yourself, Ralph, if you'd like, but you certainly don't have to. I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not up for talking, but I just saw you here in our Zoom room, and I'm grateful that you're joining us. We look forward to hearing more about you and your story.
Same here, and I appreciate joining the group. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ralph, very much. Nancy Smoyer, you also said that you teach and have taught courses on the Vietnam War, and you use Vietnam War movies to teach. I spent many years teaching a course on Vietnam, the history of Vietnam, and I also incorporated movies from time to time. What movies have you used to teach the Vietnam War, and how do you use them?
Well, I like to do a variety. I mean, I've only done one of these, and I'm going to do another one. Would like some advice from the veterans, but I like to do a variety, so it's not just war stories. So last time I did Hamburger Hill, and Friendly Fire, and Coming Home, and then also it's only a short class of four classes, and I did a piece on donut dollies, of course, with a video. And so the next time, I'm thinking of doing using a movie before Vietnam, and actually I'd like to use information that Todd gave us when he was gave some talks on the build up to the Vietnam, what we call the Vietnam War. So I'm looking at either Go Tell the Spartans or The Ugly American, and then as a war movie, We Were Soldiers, and then as a Coming Home, what happened when they came home, using In Country. I'd like to, but anyway, suggestions would be welcome as to what people think would be good.
Great question. Big conversation. Okay, Jim Roberts has his hand up, and before he says anything, Jim, I'm guessing you're going to say no movie should be used to teach the Vietnam War.
No, I'm not. I'm going to say in the early 80s, there was a 3-season television production called Tour of Duty. And it has problems, but it basically, I think it was about 60 episodes, 20th season. It touched on a lot of the problems that were faced in the war, everything from the My Lai massacre to ticket punching senior officers, to drugs, to fragging, to the Green Lieutenant with the war veteran sergeant. To me, for all the flaws that are in it, it's a particular set of programs that I couldn't watch in the 80s, but I picked it up on one of the satellite channels. And it's got some very, very interesting dialogue and some very interesting presentations. They follow one lieutenant, one sergeant, and 3 particular men in his platoon for their tour of duty. And it's, if you can find it, it might even be on YouTube. It's just called Tour of Duty. The last part of the last episode in the 3rd season has a young man who was an M60 machine gunner on the building in the Bronx where he grew up living, and his monologue is just incredibly touching.
Oh wow!
And so, like I say, there are technical issues with it. I won't try and claim they do a very good job for what they try to do, and any veteran's going to point out this is a problem, this is a problem. But the overall message to a non-combat aware public, I thought was very good. I thought it was very well done.
That is quite an endorsement, Jim.
I'm not seeing it anywhere streaming. You may be able to get it on Amazon. I'll find a link.
It was on one of these minimal satellite channels called Heroes or something like that. And I stumbled on it, and I actually recorded all the. I flagged it over a couple of years and recorded all 62 of the episodes. So
You know, it has a very high IMDb rating, which is good. Tour of Duty, the trials of a U.S. Army platoon serving in the field during the Vietnam War. The first season is available on Tubi, Tubi, which is an app that you can download and watch things for free. It doesn't cost anything. And then it looks like rent or buy seasons from Amazon. That's all I could see from IMDb. So, and I put the link here in the chat. Thank you for that recommendation, Jim. Okay, here we go. We got Dawn, we got John Grogan, Dawn.
Okay, Tour of Duty. I have the series, and I purchased it from Amazon. You could probably, you can also purchase it from eBay. It's quite a popular series. I agree with Jim. It's well done. Well done might be a stretch for the movie guys that are very deliberate with their production things, but it's produced well. It's somewhat realistic. It has a lot of the banter back and forth. The earlier seasons are better. The late seasons get into, like Jim was saying, some of the discipline was starting to break down. There was some fragging of officers. There was some more drama than combat issues toward the end of the season, but that's typical. But I strongly recommend Tour of Duty, and it's available at the public library as well. You can order it from the Carnegie Library series for those of us here locally. And there's some quite character actors. Carl Withers, who just recently passed away. He was the boxer in Rocky, and he played an officer, a very highly disciplined West Point officer, I believe, in the latter parts of the series. And it begins to show the, I don't know what I use, the racial tension that was beginning in Vietnam, and it started to be exposed. Again, it's not a bad view for veterans and people who are interested in some of the background of Vietnam War. I got into the guys, that machine gunner in Brooklyn that Jim was mentioning. He was in the first couple episodes when the sergeant was picking his squad. That machine gunner, he was just out of boot camp, but he was going to be a killer. Okay, and that's what the sergeant says. So you're going to be a killer. And he says, yeah, I come from Brooklyn. I'm used to it. So there's a lot of that type of dialogue back and forth. It's not bad.
Okay, Tour of Duty, Nancy. That you might want to watch that series and maybe pick out an episode for the.
I've seen it. Yeah, I remember it,
it,
and it's good, but obviously it's way too long for a 3-hour class.
Yeah, but maybe you could just show one episode.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
The movie Indochine, I highly recommend for showing the French colonization period. Wonderful, and the impact that the colonial regime had on the Vietnamese peasantry. I see that there's a French movie called Dien Bien Phu, which is about the famous battle that actually took place 70 years ago today. It ended 70 years ago tomorrow. And there's a movie about it that was made in the 90s. It's a French movie. I hear it's very good. I've not seen it. I should see it. John Grogan.
Yeah. I actually have used that movie, clips from that movie, to teach a course on last stands that I teach for the OSHA program. But one thing about movies, using movies, I always tell my classes when I'm giving them, I said, Hollywood history is not history. It's just not history. It tells us more about ourselves at that period of time than it tells about history. There are some elements of different movies that are factual, but a lot of it's dramatized because movie makers have to sell their product, so they can't have it. They got to dramatize things a little bit. So when I teach a course, and this might apply to Vietnam, and actually I was thinking about doing this for an OSHA program, is when I teach a course on Custer, I call it the real Custer, REEL. And I talk about how the Custer myth has evolved from the early 20th century up through, like Son of the Morning Star.
Yeah.
Which is completely different. Or Little Big Man, which shows Custer as a madman, like an idiot.
Right.
And you could probably, and if you take that French movie you're talking about, which really shows the desperation of French troops in the trenches. And it really is good. It really is good. And I've used bits and pieces of it to show the last stand of Dien Bien Phu. But you could do the same thing with Vietnam, and you can go back to The Ugly American, but you could also use Green Beret with John Wayne. it tells us more about ourselves than it tells us about the war. And you do over a period of time, you show how movies evolved, like American opinion of Vietnam changed. So the early movies are nothing like the later movies, and it's educational. So it doesn't teach you so much about the war, but how we looked at the war and how we felt about the war at that period of time.
John, how I used to teach movies was the students had to present how the movie manipulates the audience into thinking a certain way about the war,
yeah,
and about the country that sent people to war.
Mhm.
That don't but I found with college students, it was so hard for them to separate their idea of the war from the movie. In other words, the movie was so effective in giving them an idea of what the Vietnam War was, that it was hard to overcome that they would take what was in the movie and take it for history.
Well,
And-
that's all part, but that's all, again, that's how history is taught. So when I show the movie, when I'm teaching Custer, and I'm talking about the evolution of the Custer myth, I'll show they died with their boots on with Errol Flynn,
Yeah.
which was filmed just at the time we went into war. So the movie is, dramatizes an event and gets nothing historically correct, nothing, zero. But it's fun to watch, and it really gins up an awful lot of enthusiasm. You contrast that with Son of the Morning Star 40 years later, or Little Big Man, and it shows, like I say, it tells us more about how we viewed it rather than how it actually occurred.
And Fort Apache, the John Ford movie, was kind of
Exactly.
about
Same.
Custer also.
Well, that's where you had a Custer surrogate.
A Custer surrogate.
You had a doppelganger is what you had.
Right.
That was Henry Fonda. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Uncle Bob, it
Thank
was
you.
so great to meet you in Bucks
Yes,
County
thank you.
last week. Thank you for coming to our breakfast there.
I enjoyed it. It got to meet some very interesting people.
Yeah.
Heroes and Icon Network. Saturday nights at 8 and 9 o'clock, they have 2 episodes of Tour of Duty. They also have, also on the network, they have the Black Sheep Squadron. They have High Noon. They have Rat Patrol. They have Combat. They have, I get it. I'm on Xfinity or the Comcast cable, so I'm sure that there are other cable companies out there that also have it, but they have all kinds of the old TV shows.
And it's called the Heroes and Icon channel?
H&I Network.
H&I Network. Okay. Thank you, Uncle Bob. Jim.
Right. That H&I is the network where I picked this up. Thank you for remembering that. The only thing I will say is that the Tour of Duty, I think, is a good bit different than your movies, because I'm not sure they're selling anything. They present some interesting scenes. I found in the first season, it's the first time I've ever seen of a camera angle where the camera's looking down the sights of an AK-47 aiming a weapon at an American troop. When they were walking point and walking through the jungle, I actually, it just had a really, really startling effect on me. So if you're not a veteran and you want to understand what it's like to be with someone in combat, that's probably as close as you're going to get to it. And like I say, I think it's different. I've seen a lot of the movies, and they're not selling a point of view. They're not selling anything like that. They're just trying to show a history, and it puts you about as close as you're going to get, and probably as close to as realism as a movie can do without overhyping it. There's not a ton of special effects or anything like that. Things are quick. They don't last all hour. They last for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and they're over with. And so it's picking out an episode of that might be a very good thing to work on if you're going to teach a class.
I'm going to echo this endorsement, Jim Roberts, of Tour of Duty, the series, because people who are watching this should know that you're a combat veteran. You've reflected a lot about your combat experience. You've written a wonderful memoir of it. And so if it has that impact on you, it must be something important to watch. Renee.
I was just going to follow up on Leo's suggestion of The Quiet American. That is really a great movie showing some of the early stages to the buildup and how the Cal Dai were also involved in things starting to happen in Vietnam. There was something else I was going to say to follow up on somebody else, but I completely forgot that. But anyway, if you do watch The Quiet American, I recommend the first one, which I think was in the early 60s with Audie Murphy. The next one
Oh my gosh, Audie Murphy.
was in color. The one with Audie Murphy was in black and white.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's the greatest actor in the world, but it told a good story that had a basis in realism. The next one was Michael Caine. It was a prettier movie, and Michael Caine looked a lot better, but the story wasn't as well done.
It wasn't as well done, you don't think, huh?
I don't think it was.
Oh, how interesting. And then
I
there
went
was
back and reread the book.
Yeah.
And I still think that the first one was more realistic, even with the bad acting.
Huh, that's so interesting. I've never seen the first one. I only saw the second one. So you're inspiring me to go back and watch that. There's also the movie The Ugly American, which was kind of not a play on The Quiet American, but it was a counterpart to The Quiet American. And The Ugly American was a book written by a couple Navy vets and policy kind of people. And it was made into a movie starring Marlon Brando.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen it. I don't know if it's worth seeing. The Ugly American. It was about the early U.S. involvement in Vietnam, and it was a very strong, advocating a very strong position in the war, which was that that Americans should learn the language, understand the culture, understand the nation that they're heading into before they go to war. And I mean, good advice in retrospect.
Yeah, but the book is much better than the movie in that case.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. All right. Is Ron Farina with us still? Ron had he sent me an email this afternoon with an interesting set of questions, so large that I know that we can't do it justice really tonight, but I thought I would just at least bring up the questions that he raised. And that were, for those of you like Ron Farina, the Vietnam generation, what were the movies and books that kind of gave you a sense of what to expect in war when you were growing up? You know, what inspired you might say, or what framed your expectations for war? And generally, I would think, probably be movies about World War II, movies about the last Great War. And so Ron had that question, if you want to ponder that. And he also had questions about, he was a Marine who went to Vietnam, and he thought he was liberating the Southeast Asia from the grip of communism, and he wondered how many others did also. But if Ron's not on, we could defer that for another time. I do want to invite Marilyn Pignataro. Good. Thank you for joining us, Marilyn. I know this is not your office hours, although your office hours are probably 24/7. Marilyn works for a wonderful organization that I just learned about recently because of Gary Glick. He connected us. I think Gary is with us tonight, called PALS Skyhope. And I'm going to share my screen here so you could see about it. You do wonderful work, important work, and some of your clients who benefit from the medical flights, the compassion flights that you do for people who need surgeries and their families are veterans. So I just thought you could let people know about this organization, PALS Skyhope.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Can you hear me? Just raise your hand.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I almost didn't make it because I have very stable internet, but as I was trying to get into the Zoom, my internet decided to not work. So I started to panic, but it worked just in time. So thank you, Todd, for inviting me. Gary Glick, thank you so much for putting me in touch with Todd and others. And thank you all for having me tonight. I don't see the shared screen. So wait,
I could be Marilyn. I could do it. Yeah, you just tell me when to click.
Oh, there it is. Okay, great. Okay, so PALS Skyhope. PALS stands for Patient Airlift Services, and we started in 2010. We are a not-for-profit organization, a 501c3, and we were started to provide free air transportation to and from medical treatment, diagnosis, surgery, second opinions, clinical trials, and we also fly veterans. We do this through a network of volunteer pilots, They volunteer their time, they volunteer their aircraft, and they pay for the gas, which is amazing. We also do it through patients who are so happy that they tell other patients, and we do it through a network of providers, care coordinators and social workers at hospitals and different organizations such as yours who tell people about us. Once we fly the patient to the airport, we send an Uber, and the Uber takes the patient along with their companion to either the hospital or their lodging. Our service area is east of the Mississippi River. So if you can go to the next slide. So we serve children, we serve adults, and we serve veterans. And we fly people as much as they need for as long as they need. So if someone needs to go from, let's say, to Philadelphia for a treatment every week, we will fly them every week. The next slide, this is our impact. Since 2010, we have flown over 3,200 families. We have provided more than 30,000 missions. We have flown more than 1,200 veterans. We have flown over 6.5 million miles, and we have 560 volunteer pilots to choose from. So the next slide will show some of the planes. So these are small personal planes. They're 4 to 6 seaters. These cabins, for the most part, are unpressurized. So some of our criteria, we do not have any financial criteria. We do ask the household income, but there's no financial criteria. We ask that the patient, for the most part, be ambulatory, that they will be able to walk and climb up a few stairs to get onto an aircraft or onto the wing of a plane here. But for veterans, we have flown many on commercial, on Southwest. So if there's, any veterans who have a missing limb, we are able to get them where they need to go. We also ask, we will ask a patient if they have a history of seizures, and we will ask the height and weight, because we do have some weight restrictions based on the size aircraft. The next slide is, actually stay on this slide for a moment, because I just want to talk a little bit about the extra things that we do for veterans. Obviously, we fly veterans to medical treatment also, like everybody else, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of the veterans camps around the country. And we do fly veterans to veterans camps for rehabilitation, recreation. One of these camps, maybe you're familiar with the Travis Mills Foundation. They're a beautiful camp in Maine, and we fly veterans there for a wonderful week, along with their spouses, along with their families, for many different activities. Many of these activities have been, reimagined, so that everyone can play basketball and go canoeing and cook and sit by the campfire and play ball and have a really great, memorable week together. So we fly many veterans to camps. This is Hadley. We flew Hadley for many, many years. This is her when she was a little girl. This is a picture of her. We fly to medical treatment. Maybe you're thinking surgery, but she needed hair plugs. So, some of the flights that we do are, they're medical, but maybe they're not surgical. So this is her on her 59th flight. She grew up with us, and many of our pilots have their favorite patients. So when they see a flight come in, they say, "Oh, it's Hadley. I love Hadley. I want to fly her." So so the next slide is, I just want to open it up to any questions at this point. Anybody have any questions for me?
Please raise your hand or let us know if you have any questions. Marilyn, I imagine you're looking for pilots to volunteer.
Oh, yes.
And Colin Heaton, thank you, Colin, says he has a pilot friend who he thinks would be interested.
Wonderful.
He could connect you to him or her. And you're probably also looking for donors or people who'd be willing to support the organization and the mission in other ways. And then, of course, clients who might need the services. So what is the best way for people to reach you?
So our website is www.pals, PALS Skyhope.org. There's information about how to become a patient, how to fly with us. There's a link to the intake form right on the homepage. There's also a section for pilots. There's also a section for people who want to support PALS. I specialize in the patient end. If you want to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, we post many of our flights when our patients say it's okay.
Right.
So, yeah, I just want to thank you so much for having me tonight. And it's a wonderful program. I'm really learning a lot. I was taking notes and making a list of movies.
Yeah, we have a fascinating group of people who join us here, Marilyn, and you have joined that fascinating group. So I'm very, very grateful for the work you do and for taking the time to join us and tell us about PALS Skyhope. We did put a link to the website here in the chat. We'll also share it on Facebook. So thank you very much, Marilyn. And let us know if you'd ever want to come back or if you have any news to update us on. Would be happy to share that also.
I certainly will. And if you find us on social media, please like, comment, and share, because there's a lot of people that don't know about what we do. They don't know that they can fly for free.
Right. Exactly. Fly for free. Thank you, Marilyn. I appreciate
You're
it.
very welcome.
Joe Griffiths, you said that you had something to share. I want to, if you could, Sean, find Joe. And thank you, Gary Glick, also for introducing us to Marilyn. I appreciate that connection. Joe, you were with us.
That last guest, hi, Sean and Todd. That last guest is fabulous. You guys keep topping every week like the impossible with these stories. And Marilyn, just tremendous what you're doing. Just earlier in the show, I was a little late joining, but I did see my good friend Ralph Galati. Now we do a veterans radio show. We're pretty good, but when I go on vacation, I get somebody better than me. Ralph Galati fills in for me, and
Ralph fills in for you, really?
Yes. So it's a little difficult coming back having to fill Ralph's shoes for a couple months, but Ralph is just a fantastic human being. But you mentioned earlier, you were talking about the donut dollies. I think you had on Richard Sands years ago. He wrote a book about the Edison 64.
Yes.
I believe, I'll hear from Richard in about 10 minutes if I'm wrong, but I believe he's just finished a book on the donut dollies.
And I read the manuscript. I just read the manuscript. It's wonderful. He interviewed 36 donut dollies for the book and at least a dozen veterans about their, interactions with and appreciations of the donut dollies. Yes, it's a wonderful book.
And if I can make one other fast comment, on May 26th, the Welcome Home Show is really proud to announce that military basketball is now being funded by the VA to help veterans. Mike Myers is the founder. He did a few tours in Iraq, and when he came back with Angel, his partner, they found out that veterans playing sports kind of took them out of that gray area in their mind, and they're post-traumatic stress. They haven't had a suicide since 2017, since they organized military basketball around the globe. They haven't had a suicide with a couple thousand participants. And Philadelphia was chosen May 26th. The women's military basketball championships will be at 5 o'clock at the Leocora Center where Temple plays. And at 7 will be the men's. And from 1 to 4, there'll be all kind of information about, there's military basketball. They're fabulous. We are working with the VA with Dr. Sharif Alan, who's the undersecretary, to get sports when veterans get out of the military, whether it's golf, wounded warrior hockey, another one, 10 years, haven't had a suicide, military basketball, weightlifting, gyms, to support these organizations where vets are around vets. And that's the best therapy for veterans. Another veteran can prevent another veteran from committing suicide. Are we going to cure it, Sean and Todd? No, but we can really turn it downward. It's getting out of hand, and we need these other programs. We're going to go into book clubs, other form of music that veterans can be with veterans, and I think we're heading in the right direction. Instead of talking about 25 a day, let's do something about some of them 25 a day. And we're really glad to be kicking this program off in Philadelphia, May 26th, where Temple plays all their home games, Leah Core Center. And that's it. I'm done.
Thank you, Joe.
Won.
Thank you for introducing. I'd never heard of the Military Basketball Association. Looks.
I'll forward you the information. I'll forward you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm looking at Jerry Augustine, and he'll tell you Jerry's a Vietnam veteran. Jerry, after he what helped him was lifting weights, becoming a bodybuilder, running. He won a race. Get this, Jerry won a race up to the top of the Empire State Building. I feel like I want to throw up just thinking about it, Jerry.
Yeah, I got into sports after Vietnam. I had a lot of anxiety, and I had to be the best at something when I came out of Vietnam. Later on in life, I threw away the medications that the VA was putting me on, and I became a competitive runner for 17 years. I did an average of a road race every weekend for 17 years. 6 marathons, but they were just too brutal, so I stayed out of marathons. But I was challenged in 1994, 95 to try the Empire State Building. And the first time I tried it, 1,776 stairs, 176 landings, 3 hallways. And because I was running every week in a 5K road race or 10K road race, I was in pretty good shape. So I grabbed my little gym bag and I went down to New Haven train station early in the morning. And I arrived at the Empire State Building. And I just turned 50 years old. So I was in the 50s division. They have 10-year divisions. And I ended up taking the second place in the 50s division that day. I ran 14 minutes and 58 seconds from the basement to the top of the Empire State Building. So I said to myself, I have to win this thing sometime. And I did it for 8 years. When I turned 55 years old, I said, I have to win this thing. So you can't just train on a Stairmaster. You have to do actual stairs.
Oh, Jerry, you froze. Jerry froze. So you're back.
6:30 in the morning. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I ran the 3 heats for the whole week before the Empire State Building would come up in second week of February every year. And when I came back that weekend, I just ran a mile on Sunday because the competition was Tuesday. So make a long story short, I went down there the following Tuesday and I did a warm-up from in the basement to the first floor. And I said to myself, holy crap, am I in shape? I didn't even feel my legs. I said, I'm going to have a great run today. So this was the year that there were the most 50-year-olds in the competition from all over the world, 18 competitors in the 50s division. And I finally won it. I ran 14 minutes and 28 seconds. And I was elated that I finally won this thing. So for 8 years, I've done it. And the highlight of my life, it's a chapter in my book that I wrote.
Yes.
Of how I did that.
Yes, it is. And I had the great pleasure of traveling with Jerry in Vietnam in November and December. And I was very glad that he didn't challenge me to any early morning calisthenics or anything like that. I thought that you might, and you were a gentleman enough not to. Thank you, Jerry. Fantastic story. I do want to let people know that we have a sponsor, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. We're very grateful for their sponsorship. They've been sponsoring us for quite some time. They've re-upped their sponsorship. Through the rest of the year, they are dedicated to preventing and reducing tobacco use, educating people about the harm that tobacco causes, and advocating for healthier places to live, work, and play. You can go to tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org to learn more, and they have a very helpful counseling tobacco quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW, that you could consult if you or someone you know is looking to quit tobacco use. UPMC for Life is another sponsor we're very grateful to. They came out to Bucks County and sponsored that breakfast last week. They can help you make sense of Medicare. You could get the answers and information you need, such as how to choose the Medicare Advantage plan that's right for you. UPMC for Life has plans designed by veterans for veterans that can save you money and get you more benefits. You can learn more at upmchealthplan.com/Medicare. That's upmchealthplan.com/Medicare. And I want to let you know that our magazine, our spring magazine, is free of charge. We send it to 9,300 households. We printed up another 7,500, and I think we're down to our last box of 100 to distribute. 7,500 get distributed by the 25s and 50 and boxes full of 100 across the nation. And then we send another 9,300 directly to people. You can get this free of charge in your mailbox if you let us know your address. Please do just email me, Todd, T-O-D-D, at veteransbreakfastclub.org, and we'll make sure that you get the magazine. We're working on our summer issue now, which will focus on the air war in Europe for Masters of the Air. This is where we take the stories that we hear at our events and put them in written form. We also have a survey, of course. We'd love people to take it. Takes 2.5 minutes to take it. What'd you think of this tonight's program? How could we improve it? What'd you like or dislike about it? If Henry or Sean could put the, I guess it would be Sean, put the link here in the chat, that would be helpful. Sean, you've had your hand up and have been very patient.
No, no worries. Bouncing off of the conversation before the station break and just how veterans can find solace or find comfort in things and help, I wanted to cede my time to Katerina from Warrior Canine Connection. She reached out to us and we said, please come on the program. Let us know what your organization is about. Katerina, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Katerina, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. So I'm the Pittsburgh area program manager for a 501c3 nonprofit called Warrior Canine Connection. We're established in several different states. We do have a branch in Philadelphia right now, so Pittsburgh's just freshly up and running. Our organization has 2 missions that we focus on. The first one is that we provide service dogs for absolutely free to disabled veterans. And the second part of our organization is that we actually have a mission-based trauma recovery program. And this program allows people that are military affiliated, so it could be immediate family even, or caretakers thereof, veterans, active duty. It allows them to learn how to train dogs. And so what we do is we actually use our own dogs that are kind of nearing their time to get into advanced training. And we walk any person that's in the MBTR program through the kind of finalized stages of getting these dogs up and running. And then, of course, once these dogs are prepared for advanced training, they are sent out to go to their new veteran home. So it's sort of like this cool concept of warriors helping warriors. And that's sort of our main mission here in Pittsburgh area. I'm responsible for getting members into our MBTR program. It's an 8-week program. You have a 1-hour private session every week. And we sort of cover just anything from sit down to advanced cool stuff like picking up fallen objects so that if our dogs go to someone in a wheelchair, for instance, they can go ahead and help out with anything that's fallen on the ground. And we're also looking for foster families out here. And basically you would get a dog from us that's going through training. You would attend training lessons once a week initially until you get more comfortable working with the dogs and as the dogs get older. And that is actually open to anyone. That's not restricted to only military affiliated people. And unfortunately, our program can't run without dogs being in foster homes. So, you know, either way, we're kind of looking either for puppy raisers or for people to join the MBTR program. And right now we're just trying to get visibility out here, get into events, kind of get our name out there, and see how everything goes.
Well, Katerina, I hope that you'll come to our in-person events also and let people know about the work that you're doing and the opportunities that are available. As you know, Sean has probably told you that we have events throughout Western PA, and you'd be very welcome to join us.
Yeah, I think I'm going to the next one coming up. So I will be bringing Kathy. All of our dogs are named after veterans. And she's just this cute little Labrador that everyone loves to meet and say hello to. So she'll be joining me.
How wonderful. I might talk to you about fostering a dog. My wife is retiring after 34 years of teaching in June, and I think she would be a great dog fosterer. So
Perfect. Perfect.
very good. Thank you very much, Katerina. I appreciate it. We have Nadia Rupniak here. She was connected to me from Al Longden, who is a first Special Forces Group Vietnam veteran and a literary agent. And I'm very grateful that he did, Nadia, connect us, because you shared with me a little bit of your father's story, and I thought it was so interesting and compelling, and your relationship with his World War II service experience, that it would be something that others on our program would enjoy hearing about. Nadia, here you go. I'm looking for, oh, here you are.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you, Nadia, for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about my dad's experience, Todd. He was a Polish World War II veteran, and the contributions of the Polish military to the Allied success in World War II is a subject that's been widely overlooked and forgotten. So the kind of political backdrop to how the war ended badly for Poland is part of the reason that he never shared his story with me. And I was absolutely astonished about 10 years after his death to discover that he was a highly decorated war hero. And I discovered this actually while goofing around on the internet, and I found a website in which he was listed as a recipient of the Virtuti Militari. And this is Poland's highest military honor.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I had a picture of the actual award there. That's why I clicked forward there. Yes.
Okay.
It's like the Polish Medal of Honor.
Yes, it's the equivalent of the US Medal of Honor. So having discovered this, of course, I had a huge question in my mind about why he never shared this information with me. But I also, it sent me off on a 15-year sort of research project to try and find out what his experiences were and how did he receive that honor and others besides. So I researched this. I'd like to share some of the highlights of what I found out with these few slides coming up. So the way that I found out what his experience was through his military service record. And this led me to a museum in Poland that I visited. And this picture is of an anti-tank gun, Polish anti-tank gun that was actually used during the defense of Poland during the Second World War. And my father was a fire officer, so he would have been in charge of the command of several of these guns. And each was operated by a 6-man crew that were responsible for loading the shells, cleaning the cannon, and aiming the gun to fire at the appropriate target. My dad's job in all of this as the fire officer was that he had to calculate the trajectory of fire of these guns. And he would do this by observing the enemy positions through binoculars in the field. And then he would use advanced trigonometry to calculate the correct angle of the gun to hit those positions. And the photo at the bottom is of a cylindrical slide rule, which kind of blew my mind when I saw it, because you can see it has a number of rings that you can turn to perform these calculations with. And I don't know about anybody else, but I can remember struggling with a two-dimensional slide rule at school and never quite mastered that. So this was even more complicated in 3D. And remember that these calculations had to be performed in the heat of combat. So there'd be explosions going on all around, people being killed and wounded, and the officer would have to completely maintain a clear head to be able to perform these calculations, because if he miscalculated, then they would have exposed their position to the enemy by having fired inaccurately, and then they would be killed by return fire. So it was a very responsible job that required a certain personality that was capable of remaining very calm under pressure. And I think that that does describe my dad pretty well. Next slide. So he trained to be a fire officer right up, he finished his training right on the eve of the outbreak of the Second World War. And his unit was sent to Krakow in southwest Poland to defend that historic city from invasion, which came across a mountain range from Slovakia. And it's probably well known by everybody that the Polish military was totally outclassed in terms of equipment and manpower by Germany. And they were actually outnumbered 10-1 by the manpower alone. So in many ways, when I was reading about this, I just thought it was kind of suicidal mission that they even tried to put up resistance, but they fought very heroically to defend their country. And they succeeded over a 2-week period in greatly delaying the ability of the German forces to advance across their country. Next slide. So this is actually a photograph that I found on the internet. I have no idea who the people in this picture are, but it is a photograph of my dad's brigade that he served in, and it depicts a battle in this mountain range I was just talking about, near the city of Jordanov. And I'm showing this picture because my father received the Virtuti Militari on the 2nd of September for his heroism during this battle. So the Poles were confronted by a column of 200 German tanks advancing towards them. And these tanks overran their observation posts. And in the distance in this picture on the left, you can see someone observing enemy positions through binoculars. And for all I know, that could well actually be my father. I don't know. But this person is commanding the gun crew, as I just described. And during this battle, my father received this award for heroism because they stood their ground in this open position. They were very exposed, and they fired on this advancing tank column, and they destroyed 10 tanks, and they broke the attack, forced the remaining tanks to retreat. And in total, in that battle, the Poles actually took out 60 German tanks, which is pretty impressive considering how outclassed they were. My father was also commended for the Virtuti Militari during another battle during the invasion of Poland, but for the sake of time, I want to fast forward now to 1944, Todd, next slide. So after Poland fell and the military were given orders to evacuate, they eventually made their way across Europe and went to Great Britain, where they served under British command. And in 1944, they joined the American, British, and Canadian forces in the Normandy campaign. And so this map shows what became an encirclement of 100,000 German troops in a region around Falaise. This was known as the Falaise Pocket. And by around the middle of August, this encirclement was almost complete, but there was still an open escape route remaining to the Germans near the city of Chambois. And on the 17th of August, the Polish troops, you can see their position marked by the red and white flag on the right, they received orders to go and shut off all of these remaining exit routes. So the Poles were very eager, of course, because they wanted to liberate their country. They were very eager to capture as many of these German troops as possible and stop them escaping. And they executed their orders by traveling actually overnight to reach their location as quickly as possible. Next slide. So they arrived and took up position on a hill called Mont Ormel. And this gave them a really spectacular vantage point from its elevated position, overlooking the valley below where all of these German troops were becoming entrapped. And it also gave them a good view over the main exit route, which ran alongside their hill. Now, the Allied plan was that once the Poles were in place, they would be joined by their Canadian and American allies, and they would together seal these remaining escape routes. But because the Poles had raced ahead at breakneck speed to reach their destination, and the Canadians and Americans had become bogged down in heavy fighting in other locations nearby, they actually became completely isolated on that hill for 48 hours before anybody could reach them. And so for those 2 days, the 1,500 Polish soldiers and 80 tanks that were on that hill were the only thing that stood between tens of thousands of fleeing German troops and freedom. And once the Germans realized that the Poles had taken that hill, they attacked it from all directions. Can I have the next slide? So my dad was one of the men that fought on that hill. And at that time, he was he had a position of observer in a specially modified tank like this Sherman. And they were modified, these tanks, so they didn't have an active gun. That was just a pole of wood sticking out the front. The inside of the tank was modified to accommodate additional radio stations, a map deck, and also a periscope. So his job, again, was to observe the enemy positions and communicate the coordinates to his men. He had 58 men operating rifles all the way up to tanks, and he was responsible for coordinating their fire through radio communications to take out the enemy. Now, on the 19th of August, there was a ferocious tank battle on the top of this hill, and 12 Sherman tanks operated by the Poles faced off against 15 German tanks, and these included giant Tiger tanks, for which the Shermans were no match. So within seconds, 6 of the Polish tanks were taken out. But then with shelling from the Polish positions, they were able to take out 5 of the German tanks, broke their attack, and as they retreated, they took out another 3 German tanks. So that attack was successfully repelled. But in the process, my father's tank was struck by a shell, and he made a miraculous escape from this burning tank by pulling himself out through the turret. He sustained shrapnel injuries to his legs. But one of the remarkable things about his story is that he had the presence of mind to take with him one of the radio stations from the tank so that he could continue to command fire after he got out of the tank. And this was the reason that he was also awarded the Cross of Valor for his heroism on that day. The Canadians, fortunately, managed to join up with the Poles the following morning on the 20th of August. But the Poles were, by that time, completely out of gas, water, ammunition, and food. So if the Canadians hadn't made it, they probably would have been wiped out. But the successful completion of this operation led to 50,000 German troops being taken prisoner, and another 15,000 were casualties, so dead or wounded. And the last slide. So I had the opportunity in January this year to go back to Poland, where I met with a Polish historian who's the man on the right here. He's now a major in the Polish army. And he was one of the people that helped me to understand this backstory about what happened to my dad. He arranged with a museum there to have a special exhibit dedicated to my father's story. So I was able to go there and bring some of my father's memorabilia, his uniform jackets, medals, letters, personal letters that he'd written to his family during the war, and also some of his official documents. So these people were unable to return to Poland after the war because it was a communist dictatorship. And so it felt right to bring all of these items for one of their most patriotic soldiers and bring that back home to Poland for him.
Nadia, your father fought hard to save his country and he lost his country. He was never able to go back. What did he tell you about the war, if anything?
He really didn't speak about the war at all, but he was quite disparaging about Winston Churchill. So I do think that because those soldiers served under British command, that they really felt like they'd been stabbed in the back and totally led up the garden path, believing that they were going to be liberating their country. And at the last minute, you know, the war was over and their country had been sold out to Stalin.
Yes.
A lot of people, you know, put the blame more on Roosevelt because he was very pro-Soviet Union. But personally, you know, I think that it's a bit of a cop-out to just say, well, what could Winston Churchill have done about it? I think that there was really a debt of great honor. And the Polish Air Force, which I didn't mention, they really saved Great Britain during the Battle of Britain with their great skill. And so, you know, I really do think that there was a debt of honor that should have been paid, and it wasn't. So my father ended up living in this kind of dystopia in post-war Britain, raising his family as British citizens. And I think partly he didn't want to speak about it because he didn't want to turn us against the country in which, you know, we were going to live our lives.
My Polish grandfather had similar words about both Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt for essentially bargaining away Poland at the end of World War II at the Yalta Conference, which is fairly accurate. So you feel like you're kind of recovering this wartime experience of your father. I think a lot of us here can relate to that, you know, we have family members who don't talk about their war experience for one reason or another. And certainly if it involves loss, and I believe your father's story involved the loss of his family, correct? In Poland.
Yes.
So there might have been some survivor's guilt there.
Yeah, definitely some guilt because the Soviet Union, when they invaded Poland, they rounded up the family members of people who were particularly officers in the Polish military. So they targeted my father's mother and 3 brothers, and they sent them to Siberia. And out of 4, only 1 survived.
Oh my.
So yeah, for sure, my father carried that guilt because they were targeted because of him.
And you know, Nadia, I asked you if you would come on again in the summer. I think July 22nd is the date that we decided on for our program, the Scuttlebutt, Monday night at 7 p.m., July 22nd, to discuss the larger implications of your father's story and your story. And I think the way we're thinking about it is the generational trauma of war, that even if you don't experience the war firsthand, even if you don't have any knowledge of the war, you can still very much suffer the traumas of the war passed through your family. And I mean, I hate to sit here and, diagnose you from hundreds or thousands of miles away, but I think a lot of people, again, in the Veterans Breakfast Club could relate to that sense that a bit of that trauma has been passed down to you. And it sounds like your research is an attempt to, among other things, an attempt to heal some of that trauma.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the war profoundly affected my relationship with my father. He kept me at arm's length. And when I found out about his heroism, my first reaction wasn't pride, it was anger.
Yeah.
I was really angry with him that he had not told me about this.
Yeah.
And our relationship could have been something very different if he had been more open.
What a beautiful story to share with us, Nadia. Thank you so much for coming on. And I know we're just scratching the surface with this story this time, but you'll be back on this summer. Thank you, Nadia, for joining us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
We thought we'd end the program with Bob Connor. Bob has joined us here. You'll remember Bob as the Vietnam veteran who in 2016 was called upon through social media postings to identify a mass grave near Benoit Airport. And he remembered, as an Air Force veteran, the digging of the mass grave where Viet Cong insurgents had been buried. The Vietnamese people were interested in disinterring the remains and presenting them to the families. Bob helped with identifying and returning those remains. And Bob's ever since, for the past 7 years, has been working with the Vietnamese to identify Vietnamese remains and also American remains. And Bob, you sent me an email with some pretty darn big news. There are still, say, about 1,200 U.S. MIAs in Southeast Asia. And you think that you're on the verge of identifying the remains of a U.S. POW who was buried near a remote POW camp. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I'll be very brief about the beginning of the project that started in 2016. It's been the hope all along that the more that the Vietnamese excavate, the more they publicize it, the more is going to be known about Bob Connor and the rest of the team, not just myself. There's 8 of us all together now, 2 Vietnamese engineers, Cobra pilot, and 2 infantrymen, and a civilian, ironically, that was a child in 1975 in Hue, witnessed the war, the battle. It was sponsored by a family here in Philadelphia, and worked for Coca-Cola, worked his way up the line from janitor to an executive for Coke, was back to Vietnam, oversaw the construction of a Coca-Cola plant, managed it, and he found out about me and asked if I wanted him to help. I said, hell yeah, especially after reading his background. But in any event, that's where we are today. So there's 8 of us now, and we still haven't changed our method. The hope is that the more they excavate, the more information gets out about what we do, why we do it, and the fact that there's no money involved in it whatsoever. We don't make any money off it. We don't sell information, nothing whatsoever. This is just our time and effort to find the grave and eventually drill down, look at do the research on the battle. If we're lucky enough to get the action report, we'll use that as the primary tool to find out which units were actually involved in the last part of it, so to speak, at the battle, and any other unit that got flown in, who did the cleanup. So once we go through all that, then we drill down to the unit that did the cleanup, searching for a witness. And to date, we exceed over 8,000 remains that we've identified the locations for of VC and NVA soldiers, with the hope of sooner or later someone saying, hey, I know where there's an American buried. In 2021, I was at the wall for the first time in my life, and I walked the wall. When I knew I was going down there with the family, I took a list of 31 names that I knew from grade school, from the neighborhood, grade school, and high school. All but one died in Vietnam, one died in Guam. But I went back and looked up the two that died the night of our battle at Tet 68 at the air base, Benoit Air Base. And Vietnamese woman saw me walking back, walking to different paddles, and she asked me for the list. She said, "Why don't you go to these other two here? And I'll put these in order for you. I'll be done by the time you come back." So on the way back, I noticed a collage of photos on a laminated sheet, and one thing led to another. I'm trying to be brief. Here I see the photos. I walk over to it. I didn't see it when I was walking by it before. I picked it up, and here it's about an MIA and a family going back to Vietnam to try to find them for the last time, is what they said. One of the girls said in the article that they put together. And I thought, wow, if I'm ever asked to find the U.S. MIAs, this is the first one I'm going for. And that has since happened. And the DPA has been to the site. We found out within 3 weeks of handing the information over to them that we had it was considered new and valid information. They have since adjusted the schedule so that they go out and inspect it. They did. I feel they found something because now they're going to go back. So we're still waiting on that one. The one that Todd is referring to, we have right now we have about six we have 6 MIAs that we've got in the hangar, so to speak. And I just gave you one of them. The second one is a POW MIA. I got notified Saturday about a month ago, about 2:30 in the morning. It's not usual. I get emails even at 2:30 in the morning from Vietnam. They know the time difference. And I'm starting to read it, and here's a former NVA soldier who has a similar process. It's ad hoc. He has less information than we do in trying to find his own soldiers. So he ends up digging a lot of empty graves. But here he's telling me that he found a witness that knows about an American POW MIA that was marched to the camp. He no sooner got there and died, and they buried him outside the camp. And one thing led to another, and he sent me grid coordinates. He sent me a Google Earth image. I mean, it was like, watching this live on TV, but with individual pictures. It was just unbelievable, the information he had managed to collect, because he knew what we did. He knew what we looked for. So he was very well briefed by one of the engineers a long time ago about how we do our work, and obviously to keep quiet about it. But anyway, I told him, I says, well, I'll notify. I just emailed him back real quick and said, I'll notify the DPA now. I ended up finishing that letter about 3:30 in the morning. I gave all the facts to the contact I have here in Washington. And then I sent a phone mail message to his cell phone, his work cell phone. He got it, and asking him just to check his email. I didn't want to tell a long story on the cell phone. And we connected again the upcoming Monday morning at 8 o'clock. And he says, Bob, he says, Hanoi was already involved, and they've already been down to the site to visit with the witness.
That's amazing, Bob. So,
I mean,
so
we've
there's
never had that before.
Yeah. And I mean, the process of identifying and then recovering and then, repatriating remains can take 10 years. It sounds like this is a fast track.
This is going to be on the fast track because later I talked to the DPA rep, and they're reviewing others at the site at the same time this was going on. Obviously, they didn't know anything about this one. And so I'm sure they had him on the list that in fact, he is on the list that he's missing. And he was listed as a POW. But they were just totally unaware that there was one out of the ordinary as far as where they were looking.
Right.
So it came as a surprise. It was a pleasant surprise to them. And I have enough information here that I printed out years ago on the DPA, the MIAs and POWs. So I was able to, with the information that they provide on the record, I know who it is. Let's put it that way.
You know who it is.
I don't. But I don't expose anything about the about the individual.
Right.
And I figure it's just as well that parents don't, or the family don't get the idea. Next thing you know, they get their hopes up, and next thing you know, they can't find the grave that somebody actually took a picture of another soldier standing on the grave. as a reference point. So we have the northeast coordinates and everything as far as where the grave is, and the DPA was given that, of course. So all they have to do is show up with a shovel and start digging. And it's in a relatively open area.
Bob, please keep us updated on this and on your work. It's fascinating work. It's important work. The idea of an NVA officer out there kind of looking for the men he lost, the enemy on the other side, and you cooperating with him is just such a wonderful, miraculous thing to be able to do all these years later after the war together.
Well, we're going back June 17th. We'll be in country we'll arrive the 18th at night, and we'll leave country about July 1st, late at night. And during that period, we'll have meetings at the embassy with military and government personnel, as well as their family services, same as our DPAA. And then we'll break out in two different teams. My team members will split up and go with another group as well, but we'll go to a couple of major battle sites where there are graves, such as the Benoit Air Base, where we have 6 known. The last one was just found this past December. That's how long it took to get to a grave that we all seem to know about, but no one could put their hand on it to find out where it was. And that took 7 years. But we'll be able to pinpoint, walk right up to the grave. Some of them are so close to the fence line, you can drive along the perimeter road and step out and walk right up to it.
Thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate it. I'm looking at the clock. I see that we've run over time, but I think it looks like Bob Flage, did you want to say something?
Yes, sir. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Basically, what I wanted to say was that, since this is Memorial Month, it's coming up Memorial Day, the 30th. Jacksonville has the largest war memorial in the country. And I just wanted to mention that. Why I say it's the largest, it was started by a Jacksonville resident, and it encompasses names of people from the Jacksonville immediate area from World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam, and then that's where it stopped. And then since we got into all these other conflicts, it has continued. And every Memorial Day, we have a ceremony. And if there's any new losses for that year, those names are added also. So I don't know what the number is at this point, but it's just a remarkable piece of marble. That's, it was out in front of the Soldiers Memorial, and they wanted to move it when they built a new Coliseum, and there was such a stink about it. The city decided, no, we're going to leave it right where it is. And the interesting thing is, where you see all those blocks, there's quotes by all important people, Roosevelt, MacArthur, Patton. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because of the fact that it is becoming Memorial Day.
Yes, we are approaching Memorial Day on May 27th. We'll be doing a Memorial Day program that evening at 7 p.m. And I hope you'll join us to talk about who you want to remember and honor and pay tribute to that day. Bob Connor, thank you so much for giving us that update. And I hope you will come back and continue to update on the important work that you do. I think it's so inspiring, and it's such a great story to share. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We'll be back on Thursday night with a program on the 100th Bomb Group. I hope you'll join us. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, Todd.
Well.
Thank you.